I'm John Ochens, and welcome to Schooling Around. Today we continue our look at special education in the Oxford School District. Amy Hart is a special education teacher who works out of Oxford Elementary. Her specialty is kids ages 0 through 3. We'll be back in a moment to hear about her job. Amy Hart's job is a tough one. She has to deal with situations where parents first learn of a deficit in their child. Sometimes it's even recognized prior to birth through images and chromosome information. We asked Amy about the size of her responsibility.
It ranges. I started the year off with only 4 students, and I'm up to about 12 right now. And the students receive 72 hours of service on a calendar year. So if they come in, for example, in March, over that year to the next March, they're required to receive 72 hours of service. That can mean if they're eligible for occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech and language services, and then I kind of make up what the therapists don't see those children for, and I piggyback on their goals and provide the parents with resources and support for their child.
We were curious about the process once a need is recognized.
So if they've been identified before they've been born as maybe
Is
a
that a
chromosomal...
possibility?
It is. If they've been identified through prenatal testing as having Down syndrome or another chromosomal abnormality or premature birth. Basically what happens is that child is referred, if it's that specific situation, that child is usually referred by the hospital they're born at to Oakland Schools, is usually what happens. And Oakland Schools is responsible for servicing every child in Oakland County with special needs or even mild needs. They have another system out there called Oakland Family Services that services the less needy children in Oxford. But if they're identified as a child with a significant need or a chromosomal abnormality that we know will probably lead to more significant needs, then what happens is Oakland Schools gets that referral and then they contact me directly.
So they kind of filter things out and
Oakland
assign
Schools
different
filters.
cases to
Yes.
the proper people.
That's how it works right now, right? So
Okay.
most referrals go to Oakland Schools first, and that's because they can also evaluate, and it's not as lengthy of a process. So if you come right to me and ask directly for an evaluation, I have to give that to you. So if a parent states in writing or on the telephone they want a district evaluation, I can do that right away. But it's a little bit more of a lengthy process. You have to enroll your child with the district, which is just like enrolling a kindergartner or anyone else. You have to do the proofs of residency, go up to the board office, fill out an enrollment form, and then we have to kind of find a place to on our calendar to fit you in for an evaluation. So it can take a little bit longer. Oakland Schools, on the other hand, has so many days or so many hours to call you back and get your child evaluated. Their staff is a lot larger, and it's usually a faster process. And then what happens is if they go through the evaluation process and either through the evaluation or just through conversations with the family feel that this child needs more significant services, then that child is referred to me.
Amy explains the organization of special ed in each school.
Every elementary school in Oxford has at least a resource teacher. So every school in Oxford has children with IEPs. It just depends on their need of services, of support. So generally speaking, if you have an IEP for something like a learning disability or a slight impairment, you know, you can probably go anywhere and be supported through that school's resource room.
Right, but here at OES, you don't have classrooms filled with any special ed kids right now, right?
Right, not at O.
Those
not,
kids
not
are
at
elsewhere.
OES.
They're at other schools.
Right, so Lakeville Elementary has the autism impairment program is
Right.
probably what you're talking about. And then Clear Lake has the cognitive impairment program. It's really just kind of a coincidence that I'm here. I was housed at OELC, and then the classrooms that were housed there changed to tuition-based only classrooms. I'm not tuition-based, so really we just found a space for me.
If parents find out prior to birth that a need exists, when does special ed get involved?
Oh, right away. So what happens is I'll either get a referral from through fax or email or a phone call, and I usually get the parents' name and phone numbers, usually what I get, along with any other information they have about the child. And I try to call that parent as soon as possible and talk to them about who I am, what I do in the district, and just see if they're interested in getting an evaluation done. I mean, it really is a service that we provide where the family has to be behind it 100%.
Right.
Because I do home visits, I offer playgroups to some of the older students, and I can't really do anything without the parent support. And the whole idea behind our service is helping and supporting that family, that mom and dad or grandma or grandpa, whoever the primary caregivers are in that child's life, to reach a more developmentally appropriate milestone. So through evaluations, we find out where the child may have a deficit, and we make outcomes with the family based on where that child needs the most support, whether it's speech and language, fine motor skills, gross motor skills, a combination. There might be some cognitive concerns. So we really work with the family to develop goals for that student through the evaluation and the IFSP or IEP process. And then we, after that's, the paperwork part is done, then we provide direct service to that family.
We'll talk about the emotions involved with this in a moment.
Hi, this is Connie again from Connie's Kitchen, coming to you from Treetop Lodge, the place where magic happens and unicorns roam freely. Of course, you have to come to the lodge to understand about the unicorn thing, but they're everywhere. We'll be doing a wide variety of cooking shows here on Oxford Community Television, and I personally would like to thank the crew for coming out and giving me this opportunity to share my passion and what I love to do with you from Connie's Kitchen. So please join us on OCTV, join us at the lodge, and look for us all over the town. And if you see unicorns, they probably came from here. See you soon.
So how do you deal with the emotions when parents find out their child has a special needs?
It's hard. Every situation is different. Every family is different. And even within the family, the mom and the dad or whoever the primary caregivers are may have a different perspective or attitude toward what's going on. So I think it's really important to work really close with closely with the family, find out how they feel about it. If they have a positive attitude about it already, really jumping on board with that and moving forward as quickly as possible, I think is very important, because, you know, every child, I feel, is just such a blessing, and just such a miracle, that I really think it's important that parents view their child as a child first, and then, you know, let us be a part of the process of helping your child meet milestones. And if the family has either more of a negative attitude or a stigma attached to what's going on, or they're just really down about it, I think it's important to provide that family with a lot of resources, a lot of support, you know, opening the door to phone conversations, text message, whatever that family needs, leading them in the right direction if there are support groups for what's going on with their situation with their child, or if I know of a parent, I've kind of hooked parents up before.
It must be quite a challenge changing attitudes from doom and gloom to hope.
I don't know if I've ever met someone with kind of an end of the world. I've had parents, to be honest with you, I've run into parents who were kind of more, they weren't knowledgeable kind of what was going on with their child. So I've had more situations where they really didn't know that their child, you know, would in time be diagnosed with autism or, you know, a cognitive impairment or something. So just kind of that process of getting from point A to point B, as far as, you know, a parent walking in and saying, I have a speech concern for my child, and then it ends up being something else through the evaluation process or over time. And I think, you know, the most important thing to keep in mind for everyone on board is knowing where the parent is. Because if they're not ready to take that next step, or if they're not ready to process what's going on, you've hit a wall. So I think really just trying to be on the same level as the parent is through the whole process is really important. I'm with some families for 3 years, you know, so, or even beyond. I taught the 3 to 5 year old special education too. And so I had some kids from birth all the way to 5 years old before they went to kindergarten, and I was with those families that whole time. And I think just really being empathetic to where the family is crucial, to really make an impact on the family.
We asked Amy to describe a home visit for us.
It's a lot of talking with the mom or dad or whoever's there. So it's really nice. Usually on the first home visit, what I do with the family is I sit down, I review any paperwork we've done up to that point, just to make sure there's no questions, no lingering concerns or thoughts about it, because that evaluation process and that IFSP or IEP process with a newborn, it will be an IFSP, which is individualized family service plan versus an educational plan, which is what most of our 0 to 3 kiddos are on. We go over the outcomes that we developed. I think that's important to touch base back on what we've done, because what we've really done is analyzed the child and the family and come together with and developed outcomes for that child and the family. So I just want to make sure that everyone's still on the same page, we're all on board with it. I review what services their child is going to get, and I talk with the family a lot, write a lot of notes about some things that they may have thought about, some resources they might be interested in. So these are questions or things that I'll talk to them about at the end of the process when we're all sitting around the table. I'll tell them a little bit about what our first visit is like. But I think it's really important for the parent to feel that they are a part of that process, a part of that IFSP process, and a part of, they're the biggest part of their child's development. You know, I'm only there, we're only servicing that child 1.5, 2 hours a week.
Is there a particular type of case that you see more than any other?
Speech and language delays. So whether or not that goes hand in hand with something else, sometimes it's hard to tell when they're this young. If, you know, we may get a student in and they may have, a lot of our students have speech and language delays. So sometimes it's just a speech and language delay.
And that probably wouldn't be recognized until they're a couple years old, maybe, huh?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, it depends on how much the family is aware of speech and language milestones and how involved they are in the pediatrician visits and how knowledgeable the pediatrician is also. So there's kind of a lot of components that go into it. But, you know, really by their first birthday, you know, the general rule of thumb is they're saying mama and daddy and maybe a couple of other words are trying
Right.
for it. But, you know, that first birthday comes, nothing is happening, and maybe the child wasn't babbling or cooing either, but the parent wasn't concerned about that. They just think, oh, it's okay, they'll catch up, they have time, they're pointing, they're doing other things, and then suddenly the child's 2.5, and we're at this huge kind of precipice in their development where they're supposed to be, you know, using 2 and 3 words together, sentences, asking questions, and they've never moved past that, you know, that first milestone of saying a couple of words.
We'll talk about classroom visits in a moment. Amy Hart tells us when she starts classroom time with the kids.
I offer the playgroups to the families during the whole process, and I start talking about it at evaluation, usually after 2. It's the whole purpose behind the playgroup is helping the kids transition from a preferred to a non-preferred activity, moving through different activities like table time, washing hands, sitting down at a table for snack, listening to a story, that kind of thing. So after 2 is most appropriate. Before then, you know, it's not as developmentally appropriate for them to be able to do those things. So I don't offer that really until after 2.
Okay.
Amy shows us some of the tools of her trade.
Yep, this is called a 32 location board. And it's a nice tool for students who aren't using words yet. If they can learn where some of these symbols are, they can start asking us things or telling us things like, I want to play, for example. And the great thing about visuals is that children, especially children with speech and language delays, can be visual learners if they're not learning auditorily.
So in other words, while they may not be able to speak the words, they will recognize the signals and know what to point to
Yes.
in order to ask for certain things.
And this board is used in the 3 to 5 program, and if the child goes on and doesn't use words at 3, 4, or 5, this can actually be put into what we usually call a talker. So they've already learned where these are, so they push the buttons, and on this device it would actually say, I want play, and we would put other vocabulary in there called fringe vocabulary. This is core. So we use these words. I think it's 80% of what we say are these words.
Okay, you've got a schedule there?
I have a schedule here. So there's a couple pieces missing that my students have walked around with, but this can be very helpful for when we're transitioning. For example, if a child needs some visual support with cleaning up, I can go over and say, oh, it's time to clean up, and they might recognize this. They might not be listening to what I'm saying, but they might recognize this and use this as their cue to clean up. There's also an I want here, so I've used this in the classroom. It's they can say they want snack or they want to wash their hands or something like that. So these visuals are really nice alternatives to maybe sign language, although we encourage that as well. It's really whatever the child uses. we try to support that.
What makes you happiest about your job?
I love my job because I feel like I am really embraced by families, and I really feel like I make a difference. I see the child grow physically, emotionally, cognitively, and it's just a wonderful feeling to be a part of that process.
Anything else?
As the kids approach age 3, where her responsibility ends, what then?
As they're approaching their 3rd birthday, I do something called the transition, which is where the family and I sit down, we talk about the student, the child, we talk about the progress that they've made with their outcomes, the concerns that we have, and all that. And we talk about where the best placement for their child would be. So it could be that they've been in the program for speech and language services only, and they've met their outcomes, and the speech and language therapist and I are feeling like, you know, the child is caught up and we feel like they're going to do okay in a preschool setting. So that child may go on to a preschool, you know, a preschool setting, and then if so basically we might reevaluate the child at that time and say that they're no longer eligible for services. So there's that child. And then of course, if their concerns are popping up after 6 months or so, we can take a look at that child again and see if they're eligible for services. And then there's the child who may go on to a preschool of their parent choosing and receive walk-in speech services, if that's what they're getting at the time. And then there's the child that we feel at 3 still needs to be fully supported in a setting with a teacher with special education background and a setting that's just more supportive. And for that child, I would recommend that they move on to our 3 to 5 early child special education program. That is housed at Leonard.
We asked Amy if she could think of one of her most challenging cases.
I mean, I think that it's important to keep in mind that I can't know a child's full potential, really. I mean, no one can until that child is an adult and they've received as much support as they can. And I think it's really important that, you know, we offer this service from birth on and parents know about it, because I think the more that a parent is involved and knows about the resources that their child has available to them, because there are a lot of services. If your child is really diagnosed with something like Down syndrome or autism or a significant speech and language, something like apraxia, for example, there are, you know, we live in a state that has a lot of resources. We live in a county that's very supportive, and you know, there's behavior specialists, there's some really great autism programs out of Beaumont, there's outpatient therapies that their families can bring them to. So I really think that to unlock a child's full potential, they really need as much support as possible.
We asked her if there was anything on her wish list for her program.
That's a good question, and parents ask me a lot about resources and what's available to them. To be honest, and I talk to parents about this all the time, the best resource is the parent, especially for this age group, especially for, you know, the 0 to 5 population where they're at home more than they're at school or church or anywhere else they may go. The parent is the person in that child's life who is communicating, which, like I said before, was one of our biggest needs, with that child the most regularly. The child is asking the parent for needs like drinks, you know, food, potty needs. They're asking for their wants. So the parent is the biggest resource. I mean, I guess if I could, you know, give money to anything, it would just be more parent resources. But the parent themselves is the best resource for that child. The worth of a parent is, you can't measure it. They're worth their weight in gold. If the parent really jumps on board and, you know, is more engaging with their child, follows their child's lead, really listens to what their child's saying. I think, unfortunately, we're in a world today where in a lot of families, both parents work, and at the end of the day, they're exhausted, and they don't know how to give their kids 150% because they've already worked for 8 to 12 hours
Sure.
somewhere, and they don't know how to engage with their child because all they want to do is sit down and watch television or go on their iPad or go on the computer or something. So I think that something that is overlooked is the importance of the parent in the child's world.
How do you deal with a lifelong situation like Down syndrome?
Well, I know that, like I said before, in Michigan, we're a birth mandate state, which means we follow these kids with Down syndrome, for example, through age 26 on an IEP, and they're fully supported educationally. And that means things like co-op, volunteering, and being supported by a teacher through that process. So as far as when they get older, I think it's really, really nice in Michigan, and we have a great program here in Oxford that supports those older students as they kind of transition from being a high schooler to, if it's possible, a more independent adult. And I also think that the parent network in this county and this district is so strong that if you are diagnosed with something like Down syndrome, you can find at least one great family that you can kind of pair with and talk things over with and realize, you know what, it's not the end of the world. Every child's a blessing, and I don't like to give this scenario, but you never know what's going to happen. You can have a typically developing child and have an awful accident happen.
Sure.
And that child can have a traumatic brain injury and need special education for the rest of his or her life. I mean, we can't predict the future, and you never know what's going to happen. I mean, my biggest message to those parents is just love your child. Your child's a miracle. Let's embrace these child's strengths. And then as time goes on, we discover where these child's deficits are, then we can put supports in place to help that child with those needs.
Amy shares a final message with us about 0 to 3 special ed.
I think so. I think it's important for parents to know that that Oakland County or Oakland Family Services exists, so that even if they go through me directly, or they go through Oakland schools and their child isn't significantly delayed, but the family still has a concern, that they can receive services from birth to 3 on something called an IFSP through Oakland Family Services and receive monthly support. It's not as much support as our special education provides, but it's something, and I think it's nice to have that resource available.
And what does IFSP stand for again?
That's Individualized Family Service Plan. So when a child comes to us and they're newborn to 3 years old, they're not on an IEP, which is their educational program. They're on an Individualized Family Service Plan. So because these children they may be newborn, and they may not, on a standardized test, be eligible, because they're typically developing at that point. It's a family plan that says, we know that this child has this going on, maybe a brain abnormality or another diagnosis. So we're anticipating needs, but at this point, what can we offer you? What supports can we provide to your family?
Someone once said, teaching is leaving a vestige of oneself in the development of another. And surely the student is a bank where you can deposit your most precious treasures. In the case of Amy Hart's special students, so are the parents. Thanks to Kyle Snage at the controls, Dan Weiss at the editing desk, and you for watching. This is Oxford Community Television, keeping it local.